Hello everyone, and many thanks to the organizers, to the Telegraph, for inviting us to this great event. I'd like to ask for the panel members to join me. We have actually Dr. Deep Chana, Sean John, Miss Sean John, and Mr. Dob Todorov. Actually, Dr. Deep Chana is the Deputy Director of the Institute for Security Science and Technology at the Imperial College London. Ms. Sean John is Chief Strategist EMEA at Symantec, the security services provider, and Mr. Dob Todorov is the Regional Technology Officer and the Architect for Security and Compliance at Amazon Web Services, which is the cloud services provider. So after welcoming them to this panel, I'd like to make the suggestion that the format for this part of this conference changes slightly, and we would like to have it a bit more interactive, taking questions from you. Maybe you would like to start, but maybe I just take the first question and set the stage by asking our panelists here their view on the changing role of the security perimeter. Of course, as you'll know, the typical paradigm in managing security has been based on building up walls around assets and trying to defend those walls from any incoming attacks. So as the paradigm shifts and the dynamics of the business is changing, I would like to ask maybe Sean to go first and give us her view.
Yeah, it's one of those things you hear a lot about, the disappearing perimeter, and I was saying earlier on, to my mind, it's a different view. It's actually a multiplying perimeter. So historically, we've sort of had that eggshell model of security with the really hard shell and the really soft center. And that's becoming porous now as we use cloud services, we have mobile workers and things like that. For me, it's actually not just about having a disappearing perimeter, but that multiplying perimeter. Instead of having that one hard eggshell with lots of leaking areas, you've effectively got many different shells. So instead of having a chicken inside one egg, you've almost got lots of little chicklets running around with their own little eggshell on top of them, each of which needs to allow communication between the different chicks while making it work. So it's something I talk about a lot. So obviously, the idea of, I don't like the idea of saying it's disappearing perimeter, because that implies you can take away all those security controls that if you would soon notice that in an organisation it would come to the end. But you can't assume that having a perimeter is enough. Okay.
Any other views? Maybe Deep?
Yeah, I might jump in there. I think I'd agree with that. I think the idea of just saying that the perimeter is going to disappear completely is not really correct, and there's obviously going to be some need to have something like a perimeter. The question is, what does that look like in the future, given the way things are going, the way people are using computers and devices in their everyday lives and at work. I think one of the things that I'd like to just highlight here, I think, is that a lot of times when people think about risk mitigation for cybersecurity, they're normally talking about reducing the likelihood of an event happening. I think that just came up at the end of that last session. And that's really focusing on just one part of the risk. And the other part of mitigation is making sure that the impact is small and that you can actually recover quickly. And if you start thinking about this idea of actually relaxing or reinventing that sort of perimeter concept, and you go away from that hard shell model, you have to then start realizing that breaches will happen. And I think many corporations need to start understanding that, as well as trying to stop things from happening, they should have a mindset of certain things are going to happen. And if they do happen, what am I going to do? So that means that a lot of mitigation activity, I think, could be focused better on looking at recovery and looking at resilience, as well as looking at the sort of bringing down of likelihood on the various threats that are extant.
Great. Dob, would you like to
I agree with that. I think there is a couple of trends that all of us see today, and I'm sure that that's not news to the audience here at all. But when it comes to cloud services, indeed, it's become the new mainstream platform for delivering IT these days. And no, cloud services no longer live in the hard shell of your data centers. Cloud services actually allow you to go global in seconds. They allow you to address a global audience as well. And therefore, no, they don't necessarily live in the confines of a single premise. They actually live in multiple data centers in multiple regions that cloud services providers have around the world. And not only that, we see mobile applications as well. Each and every one of us has one, perhaps even a few smartphones in their pocket, and these smartphones, they access all types of information, ranging from official perhaps to top secret information. And yes, these devices are our interface to our systems, which live in either hard shell data centers, but more often than not these days, they happen to live in a cloud-based environment. Another very important consideration today is that whereas before we used to have monolithic applications which reside again with the confines of a data center and perhaps have a single very big but still a monolithic function that they deliver, and obviously they process data in some way and they give you a single result on the output as well. What happens today is we actually see ecosystems of applications, and we see the revolution of microservices. We see multiple different applications, both on the back end as well as on the front end, collaborating with each other, communicating with each other via APIs, via open data, via various different interfaces to bring together a user experience and a much more complex function. And as that happens as well, we're also seeing new paradigms in software development and service management, like DevOps, for instance, and continuous integration and continuous deployment types of practices, which means that quite often, and in our case, that's a daily life, we see organizations that have tens of thousands of services communicating with each other via very complex interfaces. And with that in mind, quite often the question becomes, so which security level are we looking at? The security level of the system as a whole, or the security level of each and every of the individual components? And in such an ecosystem where you've got continuous integration and deployment of various services, is there really a single state of security for such a system, or is it a constantly evolving living organism, an ecosystem of applications that has a much more complex security level as opposed to just one single security level that is something that we can assess? So definitely the information actually lives around us and with us today. It's no longer within the security boundaries of your data centers, and that's the new normal.
Okay, at this stage you can take questions from you, if you may. Not just yet. Am I seeing right? I think I do. Well, I can go on with following up on this theme. I could go ahead and ask our speakers here about this changing role of actually the changing nature of the breach, and the fact that it's becoming a strong likelihood rather than anything else. So it's not so much a question of whether it's likely to happen, but more a question of time. Somebody is very likely to be hit, and maybe the question is, what are the preventing measures and what can be done in the aftermath of it? Sean, would you like to go first?
Okay, yeah, so I think there's lots of different ways you can break down how a breach might happen. A simple one that we tend to use, Semantic, is to talk about the reconnaissance stage, the incursion, discovery, capture, and exfiltration. Obviously, the incursion is when you tend to get the malware or the attack or the social engineering of somebody down the pub to get them to give you their password for a pint of beer or whatever it might be. That's the breaking into the organisation. But then after that is that discovery across the capture together the information and sending it out. Probably the hardest place to stop is at reconnaissance, because you don't even know it's happening. It's happening out there. It's then the incursion bit is when a lot of the next focus is on historically in terms of protection, putting security software out there to protect it. But then when people are maybe not so strong at is looking at that discovery, finding out if something's going on in the network, or even the capture, the pulling together information, the loss of data out of the organisation through that element. And it's one of those things where it'd be interesting to know from the people here actually, how much they divide their budget between or their focus between looking at stopping that incursion and detecting maybe the discovery, capture and exfiltration, because they're very different things. I mean, stopping incursion is about awareness training and about running technology to try and protect something happening, but the discovery and the detecting of something once it's inside the network is a different approach. I think that's probably one of the biggest things we're trying to answer as an industry at the moment in many different ways, and it'd be just interesting to see, you know, what the thoughts of people in the room are on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Deep, along these lines, do you think that technical measures like encryption, for instance, would do any good at the data level, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of stuff you can do, both on encrypting, you know, data where it is stored, and then also encrypting its transmission. And we were talking just before also about things like ensuring obvious things like you have resilience in backup and you understand where your data is and all of this sort of stuff. So I think all of these sort of tools, of course, can help. What's very important, I think, is to be able to architect the entire system in such a manner that you have a holistic understanding of all the measures that you're taking on your system, and that they're appropriate for your system as well, that they keep your business running the way it should and they deliver the right level of security. But one of the things that I think is also quite interesting in this is to, and I think it's a very obvious thing to say perhaps, but it's to differentiate between, when we talk about data breach, quite often I talk to people and they think in terms of the data being lost. I've heard a lot of that today, that the data's been lost and it's gone, as if someone would have sort of stolen your car in a sort of physical security kind of analogy. The really difficult thing with this, of course, this area, is that data can be copied. And if your detection scenarios or if you're...
synchronize it or move it between regions at their own will, and absolutely it's within their control to protect the data through encryption, data integrity authentication, PI identification and various other tools available today. But we as Amazon Web Services do not transport such data outside the region.
Okay, maybe at this stage I could ask back again whether there's any questions. Have you stimulated? Please, go ahead.
Ed Davis, Government of Gibraltar. Just really building on Dob's answer there. And excuse me, I'm a bit of a layman in this business. So if you've already answered it, Dob, I apologise. But I think you talked about, you know, your customers into your company backwards and forwards, and how you assured that relationship. Is there a third party in this in terms of the platform provider and the means by which you do that? And how do you technically, what are the sort of technical challenges of managing, you know, what they provide for you and your customer? And is the corporate space particularly good at putting those three players together in your experience?
So yes, there is always, Amazon Web Services is a very secure general purpose platform. And today we comply with standards such as ISO 27001, SOC 123, PCI DSS, ISO 27017, 18, etc., and another 20. So we are a trusted general purpose platform, but at the same time, we know that our customers have very specific security needs, which may be very contextual to the vertical where they operate, or the specific area of interest that they have when it comes to storing data in a cloud-based environment. And that's where we have third parties, managed security providers, managed security services providers that typically partner with us to provide much more contextual services to our customers on top of the otherwise very secure and general purpose platform that we have. So yes, there is often room for not just Amazon Web Services and a customer, but there is partners as well. Likewise, there is independent software vendors, including Semantic, for instance, as well as others that we work with today, which in a very similar fashion are able to address capabilities which are not part of the core platform that Amazon Web Services provides.
Yeah, and I'd actually say from our perspective, coming from the inside out, so to speak, if Amazon are the outside in, it's like you set policies around things like taking, for example, you know, data loss prevention. You set policies around that inside your organisation. So looking at how you could take that same policy and that same management approach and apply that to things you might put in the cloud. It's about, for us, it's about how do we take the governance that you're trying to achieve on your internal systems and allow you to apply that onto mobile systems and onto cloud systems, but still get the same visibility, the same enforcement, the same policy control, rather than having to buy 5 or 6 different things based upon each different vendor you go to. So that's and I don't think we're alone in this, but I know for Symantec that's a big journey we're on at the moment. Is it doesn't mean you need exactly the same enforcement in each area, but you probably want that overall view of, you know, where is my sensitive data, which cloud service is it? Is it in Amazon? Is it in Office 365? If I've gone to Office 365, can I put the same control over email you might be sending out to stop people sending out sensitive data on email in the cloud in the same way that I would do if it was internal? I mentioned that because that's one we've already launched. But that for us is, I think that's where we're on that growth at the moment is, yes, you've got the stuff built into the cloud and make the cloud service you use as secure as possible. Yes, you've got the stuff you do internally as secure as possible. It's about how do we provide that governance to give you the same level of control. So you might combine what's built in from a provider with the extra controls that you need for your environment, whether that's collecting data from the provider to be able to audit and report on it, or whether it's extending your own controls out into the cloud. That will be dependent on the service and dependent on your requirement. I think, you know, we talked about this for a number of years. I think that is where we're really on the growth at the moment, and I think that will be what will make the difference to the success of the cloud. The fact that I can do that same scenario planning, effectively going back to the topic, and looking at how I detect a breach, whether it's internal, external. That breach doesn't have to be a theft. It can be an employee emailing the entire company address database or your results pre-release out through a cloud service. You want to detect that if it's in the cloud, whether it's locally. Neither of them is actually a technology problem. It's a human problem that you might use technology to help detect. And I think that is the maturing area we're on at the moment. I think it's the exciting next 2 years really in the industry as we start to really see that growing up. So you don't have to compromise on control. You might have a different way you do the control, but you get the same level of governance, whether it's internal, external, mobile or not.
Just mitigation scenarios are around finding that hole in the data to alert you that something's gone wrong. You can be in real trouble, right? Because actually the powerful thing to do is to be able to copy data out. Then how do you know that things have actually been moved away? And in that scenario, you can get attacked either immediately after that's happened, or there could be quite a long period of time after you've actually lost that data, you don't know it's gone, and that can be used later on in time against you. So even though you take some of these measures, then you still might be vulnerable. Encryption in that case, though, I guess would be very useful as well, because of course then if things are copied out, then perhaps you've got a decryption issue if you're the attacker, right, to deal with.
I will put a ride on that, even though we make encryption software. Once you encrypt something, you don't know necessarily where it's going or how it's moving. So it's not just encryption alone, it's where things like data loss prevention technologies sit as well, not just to do the loss prevention, but actually to detect data moving, detect where it is, know how it's working. It's almost that using technology that was maybe used to stop the incursion years ago to actually be a way of understanding the threat across the organisation, understanding the exposure. So using something like DLP as part of an information governance program, which helps you to address things like the cloud and take them and understand where they're going in a way that the broad brush of just using encryption on its own may not give you that insight.
Okay, and along the same lines, Dob, how could data be managed while in transit, especially for a cloud service provider like you, when you move large sets of data from one cloud location to the other? How does encryption work? How does key management help in this case? What could users do in this regard?
That's an excellent question, Andreas. I think encryption is a very powerful tool for a specific set of use cases as well. I would probably step back a bit and generalize on some of the aspects that we see our customers talk about before going back and answering the specific encryption question, if that's okay. Today, we got more than 1 million customers, and their data and the availability of their services are important to them in various different ways. Some of these customers store confidential data on us, which may include personal data, it may include trade secrets. We've got customers storing public data on us, and yes, a lot of public websites, which happen to be the faces of large internationals to the world, contain non-confidential public information, but at the same time the integrity and the availability of these services is of very high importance to them as well. And finally, we've got our customers asking us for availability and resilience. So making sure that their services and data are highly available at any point in time for the purposes of business continuity and disaster recovery is another big consideration in a cloud-based environment. And we need to address all of these scenarios, and I would suggest that any organization approaching security and compliance in a structured and holistic fashion looks into into all of these three aspects, and obviously confidentiality is going to be one of them. When it comes to encryption, we definitely understand when customers need to protect their data through encryption for the purposes of protecting the confidentiality of the data. And yes, our customers today have a number of different options of protecting data in flight as well as at rest. And that includes options whereby we allow our customers to encrypt the data on premises, on their own premises in a trusted environment to their standards, and then transporting a bit stream of zeros and ones which have been encrypted for permanent storage in the cloud as well as in transit. That includes scenarios whereby we can do key management using our own proprietary services such as the key management service, as well as hardware security models in the cloud, as well as hybrid scenarios whereby a customer can give us a key that we can use to encrypt or decrypt the data and then dispose of the key in a secure fashion without storing it in permanent storage. When it comes to Amazon Web Services transporting data across different locations, the way Amazon Web Services works is that we've got regions around the world, and these regions are collections of data centers. And when I say collections of data centers, they're typically grouped together in the so-called availability zones. When a customer stores their data in one of these regions, and we've got one in Dublin, we have had it since 2007, then we've got another region in Frankfurt, which we opened in 2014, and as you're probably aware, there is a region coming in the UK in December this year or early next year. When a customer stores their data in one of these regions, their data remains within that region. So Amazon Web Services does not transport customer data outside the region. We give customers the tools, if so they wish, to replicate the data.
Just an extra dimension which I think is worth mentioning. I mean, you talked about encryption and we've talked about these various solutions. It's important also to remember that certain businesses and certain industries, some of this stuff is just not possible for them to do. I mean, due to the fact, for example, that they're operating on legacy infrastructure. So, for example, if you think of industrial control systems and SCADA, that sort of stuff, somebody mentioned factory production lines earlier on. In these situations, the way that the data moves, the way that signals move around the systems, and the way that semi-autonomous and autonomous systems switch physical processes on and off, mean that things like encryption can sometimes be an overhead that the system won't bear. And because the system has actually grown up kind of amorphously, partly designed maybe over 20 or 30 years, there isn't actually a deep level understanding in some places of exactly how things are functioning. And so we have this other issue as well, which is when we're trying to secure those kind of entities, what can we touch, what can we move, what can we introduce that's not now going to actually throw functionality out of the window. And we're seeing a lot of those kind of issues, as I say, outside of the classic IT security world, and looking at the interface where IT and operational technology, or OT, come together.
Oh, okay. Any questions,
That's connecting
please?
things with a 5-year life to things with a 35-year life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Martin Whitworth from Forrester. So when developing scenario planning, how do we ensure that we develop scenarios that cover the realistic scenarios and not just focus on those sexy, most technical ones?
That's actually something I was saying about before. It's one of those things where, yes, there are really high-level, sophisticated, targeted attacks out there that are out to take control, and it's really sexy to design something to deal with that. And if you work in the defence industry, absolutely essential. But there's also that 80-90% of the stuff out there which is the commoditized, commercialized. We're seeing the professionalization, the cybercrime, cybercrime as a service. My favorite stat from Symantec is that in the year 2000 we saw 5 unique bits of malware a day, and then last year we saw 1.7 million unique bits of malware a day. That's not driven by advanced targeted people writing a single attack. That's driven by the commoditization, commercialization. So I think your scenario planning needs to be, how do I deal with that 80 or 90% and then do the ATP? It's like I go into customers and they say they haven't got control of patching, they haven't got anti-malware everywhere, they haven't got perimeter controls in place, they don't know what people are accessing on their mobiles, they don't know where the data is, but they're going to go off and buy some, you know, sexy box to put in their network that deals with advanced stuff. I'm like, not saying don't buy that. I'm like, but if you've got some money to spend, surely you should build the bottom of the wall before you start to put the cornice on top. And I think that's the challenge that a lot of people are doing. So it's going to fall down pretty quickly if someone can just drill straight underneath it. And that to me is the whole plan. Don't just look at the sexy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in security generally, cyber security certainly, it's very, very tempting to just go out and put out the last fire. You know, the last big thing that you heard about, and you're skewing assets and you're skewing effort and onto the latest thing that just occurred. And that's very bad, because actually you don't have any continuity, you don't have any long-term, solid development, and security, I think, doesn't have a chance to bed down. The way to approach it, I think, is really to have some sort of decent in-house process for risk assessment and to keep that living through the organization. Many times we see that even though there are some risk evaluation processes within organizations, they don't happen frequently enough, or they're not refreshed quickly enough. So you kind of make yourself feel comfortable. We've done it once every 6 months or once every year. That's great. We had the meeting, we put a few risks up, and we feel we're happy with the mitigations. The reality of the situation is that, of course, the threat landscape and just the landscape generally of the cyber physical world is moving much faster than that. So I think we need greater agility in being able to refresh those risks within organizations. And then it's easy to say, but the problem then is actually trying to figure out, what are my vulnerabilities for my business, and what are the most important vulnerabilities for me, and then actually marrying those vulnerabilities to real threat scenarios. So not just stopping there, but then thinking, well, okay, these look like bad vulnerabilities, but which one look like, they look like realistic threats? And then we have to go through some, ranking process, and then maybe go down with an order of buy, stop somewhere, and then just keep on refreshing that. It's surprising to me how often I find that sort of process isn't in place, actually. And in fact, what's actually happening, as I said, is people are pretty much putting out the last fire, or listening to the next big thing, and then scurrying around to figure out whether or not they've got that component in their infrastructure. And I think that's quite damaging for security. Yeah.
Okay, now that we have you thinking, just give me 1 second, we have you thinking along the lines of scenario planning. I'd like to ask Dob about, just to give us a response to a slightly different dimension of this issue. We know that there's risks in shared environments, and we know that it's particularly cumbersome to carry out audits and actually forensic on the cloud. Especially post-breach, when one seriously wants to look into what went on. I know that never happens in AWS, but what would your response be if it ever happened?
Well, we actually do support forensic investigations, and we're very open about that. Quite often, and we need to understand the nature of the cloud. Quite often, when it comes to security and compliance in the cloud, we use the shared responsibility model, which talks about the responsibilities of Amazon Web Services as a secure platform to run your applications on. But then it also talks about your responsibilities for employing security best practices to protect your data and services on top of that secure platform. We believe, and these statements that we have received from many of our customers, including customers like NASA, customers like the Ministry of Justice were on stage with me at our London summit in November as well, and said the same, that a cloud-based environment is more secure than an on-premises environment. And yes, for the majority of our customers, the statement that we receive from them is that cloud gives them more visibility, more auditability, and more control than their on-premises environment. And that is very simple terms. That is because of the API-driven approach to cloud, because we are in a position to capture each and every interaction of yours with the infrastructure, and therefore we can give you a very good indication of what happened, who did it, when, and pretty much you have full visibility into all the changes that take place in your environment, unlike a physical environment that you typically have little control or visibility into, contrary to the popular belief. So with that in mind, we quite often in a better position to give our customers a very detailed log of all the transactions that have taken place into their account, and you should assume that all of these transactions have been the users have been identified, authenticated, and authorized. And in addition to that, we can actually take that process even further, whereby we allow our customers to codify their compliance requirements, and then we can go back to them and give them an indication whenever someone tries to breach the so-codified compliance requirement that they have defined for their environment. So in a cloud-based world where everything is visible and automated, our customers typically have much better visibility and in a very good position to prevent such attacks, and obviously in a better position to detect such attacks and then investigate such attacks. And if for whatever reason we need to go down into the physical world and look into such investigations taking place within the Amazon Web Services area of responsibility, we do support such investigations as well.
That's great. We can take that question now, and apologies for not doing that before. Okay, I thought there was one. That's great. We heard about the ability of the cloud to be customized to meet the specific requirements of verticals like finance industry, personal data in line with compliance requirements and all that. Well, what happens in terms of notification and compliance, in case of a breach, especially in the area of critical information? Infrastructure service providers. What's your take, Dee, on that?
Well, I mean, I can comment from some of the work we're doing on interconnectivity. Again, going back to that SCADA and industrial control system example, one of the things that we've been looking at in Imperial is how growth of interconnectedness and interconnectivity of systems can create a bit of an issue in terms of who's responsible for a breach, and then who's also responsible for reporting the breach. So if you imagine if you have some sort of cascading event and it's sort of, you have an infection in one part of the system, let's say, and it moves on to somewhere else, and it moves into another organization, and it moves into another group of organizations, you do end up with some very difficult situations where it's not very clear who should be reporting, who they should be reporting to, and when they should be reporting. And I actually think there's still quite a lot of ambiguity about that right now. I think we heard earlier on today, particularly from TalkTalk, that they were in a fortunate position to have an excellent relationship with somebody in the government area who they knew they could actually reach out to. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at smaller and medium-sized enterprises, and even some very large enterprises, I think they would struggle to understand the timing of when they should be able to report a breach, and then exactly who the target for that information should be.
I think the other thing for that is resourcing. So you don't necessarily want to have top-level breach investigators sitting on your staff all the time, particularly if you're a smaller organisation. So that's where I think we were talking earlier on about, in one of the early sessions about planning, that's where it comes into knowing, not necessarily having the people hired, having in place, but having in place the whole crisis plan, which I think is one of the next things to do that we're talking about, which is actually say, when do I get the technical people involved? Do I need the operational technology people involved? Do I need PR? How do I pull that all together to collect the information to tell people what's happening, but also to help me to understand what's going on? And actually, when do I press the big red button and pull in external people versus using internal people? And that's all part of the issue. The big thing, first of all, though, is you almost need the alarm systems, the monitoring, the discovery to actually detect what's going on. And, that's where you're seeing the rise of SIM technology, managed security services, whether that's operational technology or information technology, just to be able to get that warning that something unusual might be happening.
It's a little bit like a business continuity planning, really.
Yeah.
I mean, at a more focused level. What I just want to highlight as we are running down to our last minute is that there's different compliance notification requirements if you're critical information infrastructure provider, if you're what is called the trust service provider, If you manage to personal data, and it happens that that you lose control of it, and there's also yet another a new term concerning the essential service providers, which is even fuzzier at the moment, as it relates to the upcoming Network Information Security Directive, which is due to be agreed at the European level in June next month. So there will be a 2-year spell for the member states to implement. Unless there's more comments from our panel members.
I think that just reflects how confusing it can actually be. And so, you know, you've just read that list of things out. I do quite a lot of work outside of the university in the small and medium-sized enterprise environment. And yeah, I would argue most of the people I work with wouldn't really know which one of those was the right entity for them to deal with.
I think you should all try and aim to find out what's happening to stop the breach, never mind the compliance requirements, to be able to try and react to it and stop it.
And I agree with that. So compliance and regulations are really important tools, but they should sit side to side with a very comprehensive and holistic security framework that each and everyone has to be implementing, whether in a cloud-based environment, whether on premises or in a hybrid world, to make sure that we meet our responsibilities.
Great. Many thanks to all of you, and many thanks to all of you and to the Telegraph.
Thank you.